Welcome back. You listen to the Omi Show. I am so excited. You know we always have the best guests on the planet, and today I'm interviewing Kwasi Asare, who is the creator of 2050 Forums, and also Kwasi has created a couple things. Let me say this. He's a co-founder and chief marketing officer for the technology platform Isayo, which we're going to talk about. He is the CEO and founder of a go-to-market focused agency, Feedia, which we're also going to talk about. And now he has created 2050 Forums. And so, Kwasi, welcome to the Omi Show.
Wow, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you because I'm curious. I have curiosity around all the things you're doing and like why, right? So I always start with this question. You could be doing anything in the world. You could be an Olympic ice skater. Okay. You could be sailing the seven seas. You could be climbing mountains. You could be saving children in another land. You might be doing it. I don't know. But I'm curious why these endeavors, Feedia, 2050 Forums, Isayo, why these particular endeavors?
Yeah, well, my grandfathers were both the chiefs of their cities in Ghana, and therefore we're grounded in noblesse oblige, our obligation to our community. And so when I grew up, we always were the ones trying to figure out how do we send stuff back home. I played soccer as a kid. We ended up working with all the different soccer teams in our community to send soccer balls, jerseys, whatever we could back home. Not necessarily because we had to, because that was what we wanted to do with our time and energy. And as I grew up, that service was always a part of me. And so now when I'm able to think about not just today, but the future, I realize that we're facing some really significant challenges. Climate is having a really hard time globally right now. We're having a really hard time with dissemination of weapons of mass destruction. We're seeing the banking system being challenged right now globally. Even the idea of democracy and capitalism are being challenged. So this is a moment of transition, and I think therefore we need the best and brightest minds possible to help us shape what the future is going to be.
So take me back, okay? What was the first company that you started?
My first company was called Fighter Interactive, and we were an agency also. We were a little bit more focused on the video gaming space. But yeah, that was, wow, more than a decade ago.
Wow. So subtle flex. I've been doing this for a long time. No. I love that. Um, which one came first? So Feedia is first, 2050 Forums came second, and then Isayo came third. Let's talk a little bit about Feedia. And so I hear you like in the agency world, right? Like so that speaks directly to a particular skill set, I think, around like your ability to grow other things, which I love. And so, what was your initial thought process behind launching Feedia? Like, what was your initial? What were you solving? What was the problem you were solving?
Yeah, well, I think digital media is an evolving thing. It's like a child, right? It grows up. You got to figure out what it needs at that particular moment. When I looked at the marketplace, 2 or 3 years ago, I realized that there was a number of trends that were really driving the future: blockchain, metaverse, hyper targeting. Um, and I wanted to create an agency for the future. And so Fedia is really an engine to help the newest technologies reach the most targeted audience possible. And so our clients are working on everything from cryptocurrency uh, to metaverse, blockchain, etc. And so we want to basically Fedia is the engine to help these technologies reach their target audiences, to help these technologies also reach their strategic partnerships, and also to help these technologies essentially go through the cycle that we know could end in exits like ICOs and IPOs. Um, And so we really want to be able to work with the best and brightest entrepreneurs. We want to work with the best and brightest activists and help them reach their full potential.
So there's a couple. I want to know if any of these are you. So you're the Feedia.com. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, the Feedia.com. Are you also Feedia.org?
No.
Okay. I want to make sure because I mean, you strike me as a person who is building and building and building. So I wanted to know. You might have owned the Feedia.com, Feedia.org, Feedia. You might have just owned the whole Feedia ecosystem of all things named Feedia. So, but
Right
to be
now, we're
clear
just
about,
Feedia.com, focused on that right now.
okay, got it. So thefeedia.com. 20, let's talk about 2050 Forums. 2050 Forums is a global event series guided by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, designed to drive awareness and action toward reducing the world's carbon footprint and other areas of global significance while providing brands, thought leaders, and influencers the ability to create targeted awareness campaigns via a flexible and evolving global event, thought leadership, and content series produced by Feedia. How long have you been doing it? Oh, wait, go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm
we
sorry.
initially no, yeah, we initially launched the 2050 Forum in 2019, actually, at the Sundance Film Festival. We also executed the 2050 Forum at Coachella and South by Southwest in 2019. And so we obviously, the pandemic didn't allow us to do many in-person gatherings. And so as soon as I felt comfortable bringing it back to a public setting, we were able to relaunch at Sundance earlier this year.
And tell us about the success you've had with it and like, what are some of the wins that you had?
Wow. Over the years, we've had over 100 speakers speaking on everything from blockchain innovation to ending global hate. This last year, we had we had Sammy Steigman, who's one of my favorite motivational speakers ever. He's literally a Holocaust survivor who shares his story of surviving a prison camp to now traveling the world as a motivational speaker and changing the way that people are thinking about um, how we're interacting with each other. You know, we had an amazing speaker from the Tigray Action Committee, which, for those of you who don't know, Tigray, Ethiopia, is one of the most challenging situations in the world today, and they've been experiencing quite a bit of conflict since 2020. And so, being able to bring the Tigray Action Committee to the world was something that I've always wanted to do, and it was really exciting to be able to do that at 2050 Forum this year. I would also say, performances and art is a big part of the 2050 Forums. This year, we had performances from Max Luis, who's an amazing singer-songwriter. We had a number of performances from one of my favorite artists, Snow Raven, who's indigenous Siberian woman who just does this mixture of beatboxing and throat singing. I've never seen anything like that. You may have
Wow.
caught her on America's Got Talent. Just an amazing performer. And I would say also this year, our home at the Lighthouse became such a special uh, grounding environment for us all to just be able to connect with so many amazing folks that were able to come through. I think we hosted over 1,000 people this year over the course of the 4 days that we hosted the forums, and so maybe too many highlights to even recognize right now.
I love that. And so why is it called 2050? Like, tell me a little bit more about like where the name came from.
Yeah, so you may have seen a report from the United Nations yesterday. As a matter of fact, let me just take off my jacket. Excuse me. I'll edit
He's
that
taking
out
off his
later.
jacket. He's taking off his jacket. Now
You
wait
may
a
have seen the
minute.
report from the, you may have seen the report from the United Nations yesterday that basically came out and said that if we don't address our carbon capture issues, then we're not even going to make it to 2050. We may not even make it to 2030. And
Exactly.
so um, and it's interesting that the 2050 theme I've seen replicated across the world by other thought leaders and other people who are futurists who are thinking about the future of humanity. And so, even this year here at South by Southwest, there was an entire 2050 track. Back in 2019, when I came up with this concept, I basically had a
Mm.
sleepless night. And at the end of the night, I was like, wow, I can't believe that we've not thought more about what the next 30 years are going to be like. Because the next 30 years between now and 2050 is going to basically dictate what the next 10,000 years of humanity will be. If we do not
Mm.
reduce our carbon footprint in an effective way, then we're not going to be able to go outside, right? We're not going to be able to do the things that we're used to doing. We're certainly not going to have future generations of humanity if we can't manage our carbon footprint. And so 2050 is my Hail Mary to to humanity to say, hey, you know what? We need to address not just climate, but we need to look at some of the other things that are facing humanity and that are challenging our ability to continue to grow and thrive as a species. Right now, we've gone through 75 years of relative peace. Right now, we're looking at maybe the beginning of World War III, right? We've had unlimited, pretty much unrequited growth in our economy since,
Yeah.
2008. This year, now we're looking at SVB just failed, right? We're looking at Credit Suisse getting sold for pennies on the dollar. Like, there are some real challenges that are happening right now. And if we don't come together as a global community and start to think beyond tribalism, beyond nationalism, uh,
Mm.
beyond identity politics, uh, then we're not going to have to worry that much about this stuff because we're not going to be here, and the Earth will be here because the Earth will regenerate itself, and there will be some other species here. But as far as us, our children, our children's children, our children's children's children, they might not have an opportunity to even be born. And so, 2050 Forum is my like is my attempt to bring together the stakeholders that can help affect the outcome that we want to see for all of for all of humanity, and that includes uh, not just the thought leaders and subject matter experts, but the financiers, the entrepreneurs, and again the cultural leaders, the artists and influencers who can help translate these very complicated things into cultural themes and narratives that can be translated all over the world.
So that's what I love about the work that you're doing with the 2050 forums is that translation piece, the cultural translation. I think like, and how do we help more people see where to get in? Because, there's people who are like, dang, I really want to do something about this, but I really have no way to go. I don't know where the door is for what matters most first. Right. I think that's the key to that is like, so when you bring together all these thought leaders and you allow storytelling, and I'm a huge advocate for storytelling. It is one of the best modes of communication that we have, and helping people understand other people's plights and where things don't just matter to just one population or one group of people, but we can actually come together. So let's say we make it to 2050. Let's say we make it there.
Okay.
Lord knows. All right. What would you have hoped you, Kwasi, as your legacy, what would you have hoped to accomplish in the world?
Yeah, I'll be 70 years old in 2050. Um,
Still
and
young and vibrant.
well, I'll be in 27 years. I'll be 70. So, um, I hope that I can look back and say that we did everything we could to create the highest quality of life for the greatest number of people across the planet.
Mm.
And if I can look back and I can say that, no matter how much money I have, no matter whatever else, if I can look back and I can say, you know what? I did everything I could to help the most number of people across the planet have a higher quality of life, then I can feel good about transitioning on to the next dimension.
When you think about helping the most number of people have the highest quality of life, I love that, number one. Do you feel like you have to segment that? And I say that just because, like, I also feel like there's people who are viewing the most number of like if we're looking at the majority of people in the country. Well, by 2044, the our country will be majority people of color. I wonder if that will shift the idea of the most number of people highest quality of life, or what segment of people highest quality of life. People with the most money, people with the most interest, people with with a certain kind of race, gender. So when it comes to the sustainability goes, I am squarely in gender equality is what I focus on, and economic empowerment being under that. I was an ambassador, an advisor to UN Women and their We Empower project, and so I'm focused on economic empowerment of women, being the branch out to all of these pieces, right? So being the branch out to climate, right? Being the branch out to what is going to create just a better world overall. Um, but I'm interested in, like, what are your thoughts on, can we really do this? Like, is there, do you think
I don't think it's a question of can we. I think we have to. We don't
hmm,
have a choice. We've seen in the last couple of years temperatures on the planet rise. We've seen an increase in the number of cataclysmic events, and people don't realize, but uh, tectonic plates and things like earthquakes are also tied into climate because it's all destabilizing. And so it's not that if we can or can't, we have to do everything we can to get there, or we're not going to get there, right? And so I think that we may or may not reach our goal of saving humanity by 2050. We might not make it, but at the very least, we have to mobilize every resource we can to try to get there. Is my
okay,
opinion.
well, okay, we're gonna take a quick break from Armageddon to talk about to talk about Isaiah, okay? Because I'm curious. Tell me a little bit about Isaiah. One, like, did you was that a name that you like? Does the name have special meaning?
Yeah. So,
Um,
my co-founder, I should say, the founder of the company, initial founder, Raymond St. Martin, uh, he is a futurist and an amazing inventor. And he came up with a new asset class called the SIO, the social identity of an object. That is the
mm,
base of the entire SIO protocol and the platform. And its name derived directly from that SIO. Yeah. The social identity
wow.
of an object.
Social identity. Okay, so we're talking Web3, just for everybody out there. Social identity of an object. Okay, so I'm a computer scientist. And, immediately when you say it that way, I know exactly what you mean. I think that we're going to have to jump into that because I don't know if our broader audience is going to know exactly what you mean, even when we talk about object, and what we're meaning by object, in terms of, like, are we talking about like a box of cereal? Are we talking about like a physical, like, item and its social identity? Then people are like, "What? What's the social identity of a box of cereal?" Right? Like, so we need to. So we gonna back it up. I'm gonna go to a quick break, and then we're gonna back it up and bring it back and talk about this because I want to dig into. Do you consider yourself to be like a Web3 specialist or no?
Yeah, as much as they're a Web3 specialist because it's a brand new thing,
Then
but
there's
yeah,
that.
for sure, I would definitely put myself in the top 1% of Web3 knowledgeable marketing and business development professionals for sure.
Okay, well, I am not. Okay, so I'm I'm excited that you are here, so you can break it down, so you can forever be broke. Okay, so we're gonna go
Sure,
out to a
yeah.
quick break, and we'll be right back. Y'all keep it locked right here. If you're wondering, or curious about what the heck Web3 is and how it works, and what the social identity of a box of cereal could be, you should hang on. We'll be right back. We gotta go to our sponsors. You listen to the Omi Show. It is Sunday. I'm Omi Bell. We'll be right back after this. And we're back. You're listening to the Omi Show. I am Omi Bell. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am talking to Kwasi Asare, and we've been talking about three things, companies that he's working with. Feedia, which is your one-stop shop for all of your marketing, innovative, and business development needs across all digital platforms. And then we have 2050 Forums, which is a global event series that Kwasi has created, guided by the United Nations Sustainable guided by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And now we're going to talk about Isaiah. And so I want to talk about Web3 for a second, okay? Because I got a Web3 expert here, so I might as well dig into it. And we're going to try to break it down as much as we can break it down. All right.
Yeah.
So let me see if I got it right. So, because, when I went to school, I'm not even that old, but I'm just saying, now you got people who focus on different parts of development of computer technology. Like you got front end people and back end people. No, it was not always that way. When I went to school, I learned the whole all ends of all ends, front end, back end, designing. It was not separate at all. Okay. And so our original version of the internet, we was just getting into HTTP protocols. We just getting into how things supposed to communicate with each other, how these things work together over time. We was just getting into it. Evolve a little bit from a step from that, and we're getting into how they interact even bigger, right? So imagine, for those of you listening, imagine like first you just had a refrigerator, okay, and then the next layer is you had a refrigerator with an ice maker, and you were killing it. He was like, oh my God, it's so smart. It can like spit out ice. Okay. Then you had refrigerators that now can tell you when it was open, when it was closed. It has its own data points that you can actually extract from it. You can use voice technology to interact with it. So this is the different layers of evolution. And Kwasi, you help me if I'm saying that incorrectly. That the where we are now is now the smartest refrigerator that we think can be at this moment, which is voice interactive, has its own data points, has ability to like be a unique refrigerator that nobody else can have, as evidenced by its computer code. Like that's where we are in Web 3. Does that sound about right for me just breaking down Web 3 overall?
No, yeah, I think you're right. I think the other piece that I would add is this kind of parallel ecosystem that's commonly referred to as the metaverse, which essentially will allow us to have our digital life and our digital identities um, as real as our real identities, right? The line between kind of this digital ecosystem and universe and the real world is blurred, and that's where you have
Mm.
our AR, right? Augmented reality, and this whole XR, which is even broader. But these worlds are merging. The digital universe and the real world are one. Like you said, these uh, previously inanimate objects actually have a life of their own. And this is where you start to bleed into artificial intelligence as well, because that refrigerator you're talking about has a personality. It has it has intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence. People don't think about it. Intelligence means that it has a certain IQ, a certain amount of ability to actually interact with you. And so that's a whole other thing that we're really focused on in 2050 Forum, is thinking about how is AI going to enable us, empower us, and ultimately help us or hurt us going forward, right?
Well, I think it's interesting that you're open to talking about the hurt us part, because I feel like what people sometimes get wrapped up in is like, but if it's not equitable, right? So there's these, as every piece of industry evolves, you're going to have your advocates and your activists, right? The people are saying like, wait a minute, we can do this. That's cool if we do this, if these things are still equitable. And your people who are saying like, we need to do this, right? Like, because we need to evolve as humans into the next form of living life. And so if we're going to do that, it looks like this. And then, so in my book, I talk about all technology survives if it can create what I call space, and that is safety, predictability, accessibility, community, and engagement. If one of those things fails, the tech does not work. The company will not work. If your company is failing at safety, it's going to eventually break down. If your company is failing at accessibility, predictability, which is the thing that people don't, I think, discount a lot in business and in us being able to create AI, which is the scary part for people. If you can't predict it, you get scared of it. Well, like, well, what would the computer think if I give it so much information, right? And I mean, like in programming, the computer's ability to be empathetic is still something that we are actually trying to program into the machine. And you still have humans who are creating the algorithm, thinking about how it should look and feel. And so, like, it's not without humans that these things take place. It's just that the productivity can increase. Okay, so now that's a basic understanding. I would say I think we got that. But when you talk about what you're doing with Isaiah, where does that sit in the realm of Web3? And like, how do people actually engage with you as an agency?
Yeah. So on the Asayo front, we are focusing on two particular areas in Web3. One is working with sovereign nations to help them preserve their cultural heritage. You may have seen an announcement we made recently with the government in Barbados about uh, the heritage economy that they are building out with us that will preserve Barbados's culture and heritage through its physical objects. I'll say that again, through its physical objects by leveraging the social identity of those objects. And what that means is
Hmm.
that we'll be able to capture and preserve metadata around the physical objects that are on the island that include handwritten ledgers from the slave trade period and all kinds of amazing things that Barbados has accumulated over the past 400 years. Um, Create social identities for those objects, and then ultimately leverage that data in international databases so that the world can also benefit from the information that's stored in Barbados's archives throughout the history of the island.
Hmm.
Um, Now, what that also
So,
means is that because we're creating these digital identities, those digital identities can live in multiple areas. It can live in a VR experience. They can live in a database structure. They can live in an AR environment too. And so ultimately, the goal is to be able to create interactive tools and assets that will allow these assets to be shared with the world and ultimately benefit the people of Barbados and hopefully the whole diaspora.
okay, so let's talk about. Well, I got a couple of different things. Because my first thought is about, if we turn them into digital, does that make them less safe, right? So I want to ask about that, but then I'm also curious about, and does it affect the sovereignty eventually, right? So yeah, and then and then my other thought is, I want to talk about social identity of objects. So I think this is good. I'm glad you brought up this Barbados example because it really speaks to culture. And what I'm hearing you say is taking these cultural elements and then making them available digitally. But
At
if they
least
can be
preserving them.
stolen, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
within
okay,
a
okay,
limited
okay.
scope. Yeah, at least preserving them. Now, the owner of those objects, in this case, Barbados has complete control and rights over the uses. If they want to be able to, if they want to share those with the world, then they will. If they want to keep those digital objects locked in a database somewhere, then that's really their choice. Um, we're just here to provide the tools and the platform for them to be able to capture that metadata and again attach a social identity to that physical object.
Okay, so I'm gonna go like super movie conspiracy theory,
Okay.
brain trying to take over the world, right? So let's say we do that because they become, well, they're physical objects, but because they become even more tangible. Like, does this create an opportunity for somebody to, I don't know, break in, find them, steal them, and use it as a controlling factor over what is a sovereign nation? Like, is that a
Sure.
concern?
Yeah. Well, I think that security in this environment is 100% a priority. And no matter what system you're building, if it's a banking system or a cultural preservation system or even a social network, being able to maintain the integrity and security of all the assets, data, et cetera, is priority one. And so from the beginning of this process, we are 100% thinking about data security and how we're going to protect these assets that we're creating going forward. So I think that's a great question, and 100% is at the top of our list of things to address. As far as how these digital assets could be potentially, leveraged against one of our clients, we've not kind of seen that use case yet, but we're certainly working towards just making sure that there isn't the ability necessarily for people to even break in and do that kind of stuff. I mean, now every
Mm.
system is perfect until it's hacked, right? That's the whole thing. And we're going to have to cross some of these roads as we, as we move forward. But at this point, security, of course, is 100% a focus of all the work we're doing at Asayu, for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about social identity of objects, okay, of physical objects. So
Sure.
here is my lovely, beautiful pastel pink stapler, okay? And let's pretend, okay, that this is a cultural item of mine because I staple things. I put
It's
things
a beautiful
together, Kwasi,
stapler.
okay? And you know what I do? I make sure things come together, okay, with this stapler. So how would we take this physical object and create a social identity for it?
Sure. So, if you think about a social network is a aggregation of social identities. And each of those social
Mm.
identities in the network are then connected and contextualized. And so if you think about that same model, but for physical objects, each one of our physical objects has a social identity and therefore has traits, and then can be contextualized against all the other physical items in the network. And so I think the simplest way to think about it is
Okay,
this
but
is
wait,
if
wait, wait, wait,
is
wait, wait. Hold up. Wait, time out. So, but this is how objects work in programming anyway. So are you saying that
sure.
are you saying that
Well, I think
now?
what's not happening today is your physical objects right now. I don't know if your physical objects right now don't have a place for that information to be shared, socialized, or leveraged, and there's nowhere to actually preserve that content. And so, Asayo is essentially building that layer to be able to preserve the physical identity, the social identity of your objects as well. And when you look historically, you know, just go to any museum and there's thousands of objects in there. There's not necessarily a lot of real-time data or information about those physical objects. And so our hope is that we can empower not just sovereign nations, but institutions, museums, and eventually just individuals to be able to preserve the identities of their objects and then contextualize them just like they would contextualize themselves in a social network.
Okay. Okay, given an identity. So this makes more sense to me now. And I think like when we say preserve, is that being preserved on a blockchain or is there?
Exactly.
Okay, okay,
100%.
okay, got it. Well, that's interesting because until we had this conversation, I don't know that I realized that I know more about this than I thought I did. But I think because like I said, if you're like building a computer program anyway, you would have objects that you make out of a set of code, and then from there they would have their own attributes, and they would basically interact and play with other people or other objects that are created. Um, and an example that we like in computer science or when programming is like, a car, right? There's no such thing is really as just a car. A car is a type of thing, right? And then you give it all these other things and it has its own identity. So then it is a car, it is a Toyota, right? It is a car, it is a Tesla, and a Tesla is powered by these things. This data and then you just keep the identity just builds and builds and builds. And what I'm hearing you say is you have the physical object, you capture it, and it's the preservation of everything related to it can sit on a blockchain so that but does that okay? So now I got another question. Outside of then kind of like the moral and energetic tie to it, once you put it on the blockchain, does it make the actual physical item a little less important if it's not in use? So like let's say this stapler was the first stapler ever made in life. You know what I mean? And it ain't stapling nothing right now because it's probably too fragile if it was created thousands of years ago. But now we can take the story, we can take the type of staples inside, we can take the color, the look, the feel, the way that it was constructed. Take all of that data, take the number of things that it stapled, and also link to it, right?
Exactly.
And put it. See, I'm getting it. See what I'm saying? I'm
You,
easy. I
you should
learned
be an
things.
advisor. I mean, you get. We'll talk
So what
offline about
yeah, we
that.
should. So I'm a master. Let me tell you what I'm a master at. I am a master at taking difficult concepts and breaking them down into things that people can understand. So once I
That's why you're
got
the
it,
host.
once it clicks for me, I can give you endless metaphors as to how to explain it. But does that make the physical item a little less valuable?
Yeah, well, I would argue that it makes the physical item more valuable because now people have more
Mm.
transparency into what they're actually looking at, right? They have more ability to actually understand what where this object has been throughout its life, and going forward, that information hopefully will never be lost. We've seen over the
Mm.
years, when the earthquake happened in Nepal in 2015, they lost a national museum. Bhutan also lost a number of national artifacts right next door. We saw in 2021, the South African archive burned down. If those physical objects, if those archives had an ISIO component, then we would still have all that information around those physical objects, even if we lost the physical objects. At this point, that stuff is gone. So I would argue it actually increases the value of the physical objects because it gives you transparency into the attributes of that physical object and preserves it going forward, no matter what. So our goal is to increase the value of these objects, provide more access for people. Um, Instead of having to go to one of these countries, maybe you just can visit it online virtually, right? Therefore, allowing more people to access this information. So our goal is to certainly increase the value of these objects over time and to provide more transparency into them as well.
No, I think that's right because stretching the stapler metaphor, because now that you can know what now that my daughter can know what my stapler actually stapled because you could see it, you can go, you can look, you can link to it, and now that makes like, oh my god, like this is not your average stapler, like this is not your
Right.
average axe, this is not your average bowl. This is not,
Like,
where
oh,
art.
this stapler stapled a document that became, a piece of, I don't know, some crazy ideological movement in the future, right? Now we know that that was the stapler that kicked off the revolution, right? And so,
Wow. I definitely have a revolutionary stapler in my house. Look at that. But you know what? This has been amazing. And I'm actually so glad we had this second half of I love all the conversation, but I feel like we have a lot of people listening and just people in general just kind of like, what is this thing? How does it work? What do you mean social identity? What is like, and so I'm so glad we had the opportunity to talk about that. 2050 forums, where can people go? What should they be looking at? Where should people find you? Like, what would you like to leave us with?
yeah, sure. So 2050 Forum, we're currently working on our 2023 and 2024 plans. We're talking to some folks about the Coachella Music Festival and doing a satellite event during the Coachella Festival. And then we've been invited to work at a 2050 Forum at the it's a satellite event at the Cannes Film Festival. We're also
Hmm.
working on a side event at the COP28 Climate Conference, which is coming up later on this year. And then Art Basel as well. We hope to do a 2050 forum in Miami at the end of the year. As far as contacting us, Feedia, the Feedia.com, you can find us there. My Instagram is at Amazing Kwasi. And you can just email me, Kwasi at thefeedia.com. I'm ready to answer any questions and excited to work with your community to preserve humanity going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Y'all have been listening to the Omi Show every Sunday right here on SiriusXM Urban View. Remember, become an Omi homie. Join the Omi homies community. Text HEY to 202-918-4483. HEY to 202-918-4483. We will be right back here next Sunday, like every Sunday at noon on SiriusXM Urban View, channel 126, where talk empowers and becomes action. We'll see you next week.